I've been a podcast fan for a while, but I used to listen to a bit more professional how-to kind of shows.
Right.
And that was at the time I just wrapped up from Miami Ad School. I was living in San Francisco at the time and interning with a few advertising agencies over there. And I wanted to actually start the podcast. Initially was supposed to be born there. But realistically, the market that I was in was oversaturated. Everybody was starting a podcast every day.
Right, exactly. It's so trendy in the U.S.
Yeah, it's massive.
Exactly. Yeah. And this was right after the cereal boom, so it's what everybody's talking about. So I kind of decided, why not pack my bags, come back and see if I could do something here. Initially, I was supposed to start the show with a DJ. Because of my radio background, I used to be on Radio 1 here years ago.
Oh, okay.
And so I was like, I wanted to bring back that old radio format, but I didn't have the idea.
Danny Nuttall, right?
Yes. And then I ended up meeting Irshad and Feras after their show. They're rappers, so after their gig, I bumped into them. We spoke about it. I was like, listen, I want to do a podcast. They liked the idea. We kicked it at Feras's place one night, and just, it was such a lot. There was a lot of love to it when it kicked off, because we ended up staying at his place the entire night with no sleep and just kind of ideating what we wanted to do. We knew we didn't want it to be a hip hop show, even though they're hip hop artists.
Right.
But we didn't know what we wanted it to be at first. So the idea came to something that is ownable to who we are as people, something that represents our different backgrounds, but simultaneously our third culture kidness. That we exist in our lifestyle. So the Dukkan, be it literally, for those who don't speak it, Dukkan just means shop. It's usually a little shop, be it a grocery store, a barber shop, whatever it is. And Dukkans usually are just the corner store. It's the main element in every community built.
Yeah.
Period. Usually the guy around the corner who in the little shop probably knows your parents, and if he saw you smoking or doing something wrong, would tell him. You know? You knew his kids, and it's part of the community. The barber shop is a hangout. You know, people are there to get their hair cut, but you're also talking, having cool conversations, and that was part of our upbringing. Like, we took that very seriously, and then it turned out that we all had different memories, whether it's by the stoop, and you know, you're trying to chat to that cute girl passing by, or you know. It was just part of the communities, and at any time of the day you came out, you'd find somebody hanging out. So we elevated that into a sonic experience via making a podcast.
Are you from Dubai, or?
No, so I'm originally Sudanese. I grew up in Sharjah.
Oh, okay.
Born here, yeah.
But, and so how long were you in the States then?
I was there for a little over 2 years.
Okay. Fascinating.
Yeah.
Feras is also Sudanese. Right?
Yeah, so Feras is Sudanese as well. So he comes from, so I'm, his background, so his background is actually very artistic. He has writers in the family, musicians, singers, from a very artistic background. Irshad, on the other hand, is Sri Lankan. And he doesn't come from a music background, he's just that one talent in the family.
That's awesome. It's kind of like a multicultural show. It's pretty cool.
Just quickly, so you guys have a ton of content. I mean, you have 64 shows
Yeah,
so far?
63 this week.
And when was
64.
when was the first episode?
First episode dropped January 19th, 2015.
2015. So that's a lot, guys, because we know how much work it is. Yeah, we've done 10 episodes this semester, and it's a ton of work.
Yeah.
And so you started in 2015. You already have 64 shows. It's quite a lot.
Yeah. Every Tuesday.
And so, so the concept, it's like it's like the shop, like a community type concept. But your content, how do you try to focus your content? How do you, what kind of why do you, the guests you pick and why and how and
so when we first started, if you saw listen to the first few episodes, this entire project was very learning as you go. There was nobody that taught us how to do it. We didn't know how to do it. It's just I knew these guys had cool mics at home, a couple of equipments that we could use. Like, all right, let's make it happen. And that conversation started in November. We didn't release our first episode till January. So there was a lot of background education that I had to learn.
Okay, yeah.
And there was a lot of planning before that.
Yeah.
So.
Being in advertising, you get to, you do a lot of back-end planning.
Yeah.
So there was, I had to, on one end, I was trying to build the brand and conceptualize it and bring that to life, but also I was the one who went out, to figure out what is an RSS feed and what is a podcatcher, and learning all the basics and then how to get it up online, and how am I going to get it on iTunes versus SoundCloud versus Stitcher or Tunes and Radio, right?
Which one's the right one?
Exactly, and where do I actually need to be and where do I not need to be, and then and one of the biggest kind of deal breakers that for us had was that he's like, I want to DJ, so I need to play music, otherwise I'm not going to do this. So like, okay, fine. So how do we get music? And we're on a podcast, so then what music will not get us in trouble? So now we had to figure out licensing issues. As well.
Of course.
It's a whole other drama.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was all part of in the ideation. So we
Yeah.
didn't launch till January. One thing that we all agreed on was that no matter what happens, an episode needs to go out every Tuesday. So we can, if it doesn't go out in the morning, it's going to go out before midnight and needs to be out on a Tuesday. Some rare cases out of the 64, I think 3-4 times, it ended up a Wednesday.
That's still pretty good consistency because
Yeah.
keeping a schedule is hard. I'm sure.
It is, and especially when you have a fallout with your team. Because at least, you know, you guys are, it's part of a class, it's a lot cooler, you know, you have a professor to kind of play
And we kind of have
judge
to
and
do
jury, and you have to do it. In our case, we had this agreement of, okay, we all have equal votes kind of idea. So there are times where we just all disagree, and then that can slow down your entire progress.
Sure,
so we kind
sure.
of have to
Because you have no deal tiebreaker kind of thing.
at all.
Okay, I'm the tiebreaker. I think.
So that's the advantage, right? So that's something we had to learn over time. So then, okay, cool. So we became, okay, Feras knows music. We'll leave that to him,
Yeah.
right? I knew branding and packaging very well. So the design of the show was where I came to play. I'm like, okay, because it's a Dukkan and because it's about community and conversations, we adopt a fourth wall model from theater where we never talk to the public, right? If you, for example, take sitcoms, right? You always have a live studio audience, but they
Yeah.
do not speak to the audience.
Right.
It's that kind of existence. So if you ever listen to it, the show starts and ends in the middle of a conversation.
Yeah.
Right? That's all by design. So the only time we break the fourth wall is at the beginning, if we have a guest and they have something to drop to say, or as voiceovers in the music mix at the end.
Yeah.
That's a cool concept. I like that idea.
It
So I like the
sounds
idea of
in
starting.
NPN, which is NPN,
NPM,
the American one.
Yeah.
They have us.
NPR.
Oh, NPR.
They
NPR.
tell a
Yeah.
story.
Yeah.
With their,
Exactly.
And it sounds super chill when you start the podcast. It creates a mood and it,
Yeah.
you know,
So at first it was we got complaints because we were like, okay, the street background noises are too loud, and that was all post production. They're like, oh, it's too loud. I'm like, okay, we take it down, and then we don't hear it anymore. So like, it was
had
this
to
learning
make
curve.
a
So when
balance,
to answer your question, when it came to choosing guests,
Hmm.
we had this simple rule of they need to have an interesting story to tell.
Okay, but they
regardless.
have to be, I'm assuming, something related to Dubai or the
Not,
region.
not necessarily. So, for example, we had. So, for example, Odyssey. Odyssey was a Sudanese, half African American rapper out of Brooklyn. He was in town for a show. So through contacts, we managed to get him on an episode. So in some cases, they have nothing to do with the city. They just happen to be passing by, or
see.
they just happen to live here. And the stories are very different all the time, and that's the beauty of it. So we started we started to have a model where each one has to have a set of 4 episodes a month that they kind of they ideate and they conceptualize and they put out there. So for example, I'm into the startup concepts right now, so I'm trying to bring as many people from
Oh, that's great.
startups, or they have something to say, or they started a business, they can come and do
I'll
that.
come and do that
Yeah,
because I've started.
exactly, and that's fun.
And I'm very interested in the Dubai startup scene too, so that's great.
Yeah, and which is, I think that's how I came across yours.
My
but
the former
your old
podcast,
one.
Digital Media and Tech in Dubai.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I think, yeah, that's how I came across
Yes,
yours
that's
when I
how
was
we
doing a bit
first
of
contacted.
research at the time.
Okay, I
Yeah.
see, I see.
And then Feras would connect us with all these kind of artists from the region that we've never heard of, because he's deeply involved in the regional music scene, so he knows a lot of people that he kind of brings forth. Reem is all about female entrepreneurship, female empowerment, so it's like, okay, let's bring women on the show. And it's funny, that was part of the initial formula when we started. Because we're third culture kids, I actually wanted like a half Emirati, half something girl on the show for a female voice. Because
Where is Reem from?
Reem is the perfect definition of third culture kid. She's half Iraqi, half Filipino, grew up between Iraq, Kuwait, and Canada.
Wow,
So
very
she's just-
totally international,
Yeah.
multicultural. But what do you mean third? What's this mean third? I never heard the expression.
Okay, so a third culture kid, by definition, is
Yeah.
someone who grew up their developing years outside of their parents' country.
Yeah.
Oh right.
I'm a
okay.
third
I'm
country.
a third country.
I'm exactly
Yep.
the same.
It makes it more interesting when you grow up here
Yeah.
because you're always an outcast
Yep,
in
always.
some way or
When
the
I
other.
went to university, it was very difficult.
Yeah, because you're never an Emirati, but then also
You're
for
never from where you're originally from.
exactly.
You have
so
different views. You have
Third.
different
Okay, I
outlooks on
got you.
life.
Same
I
for
get
me,
it now.
like-
Third culture. I never heard that, but that makes
Yeah.
a lot of sense.
Exactly. So when you're half a different nationality as well, it makes it a lot more difficult. So I think Odyssey, I think that's one of my personal favorites because he articulated that perfectly because he has this internal struggle where he's like, I'm not Sudanese enough for my Sudanese family, and I'm not American enough for my American side of the family. So he's like, I'm stuck in this world in the middle alone, and his other siblings don't experience it either because after that, I think his dad remarried to a Sudanese woman. So he's the only one, so he's always felt alone his entire life. And that's kind of sometimes what it feels like. So you find yourself gravitating to like-minded people all the time.
Fantastic.
That is
Well,
true.
Nicholla, why don't we trace the origin of your podcast? And
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, like I was saying, I'm a third culture child. I grew up in the UAE. I came here when I was a baby, and I went to Jess in Dubai College. I think American University. When did it open?
1995, I assume.
Yeah, it was
That's
just
like
around
20
the
years.
time I left Dubai College.
I see.
Because we didn't have universities so I had to go back to the UK,
Wait, so you've been in Dubai some time then?
forever.
Oh, okay.
Forever, wow.
Interesting.
I remember Sheikh Zayed Road with no buildings on it.
Wow.
It was just a hard drive.
It was just, remember when it rained and it was just water ponds
Oh,
and
yeah.
mosquitoes?
Hands down. All,
You know,
and
and
especially
then
if you were going around to, was it Jebel Ali, the Jebel Ali village?
Yeah,
those
yeah,
extra
it was
areas?
just water.
Yes, classic.
We have lots of stories to
I
tell.
came and the buildings were already up.
Oh
Yeah.
no. So my story starts. I grew up here, but in 2009 we moved to Oman. My husband's job took us to Oman.
Okay.
So I started a community there called Muscat Where Can I Find? It's a Facebook group. It's helping people find what they're looking for, and through it I sort of became a community connector type of thing.
Nice.
And then, because of it, I got the opportunity to go on the radio. Now, I don't have a radio background, but they said, Nick, you can talk and ask questions. You're good at
You sound
that."
great for radio. Come on board.
So I was like, okay, I'll do it. So I did a show. At that point in my life, my daughter was 2 years old. So I did a show called Mums on Monday. And it was a half an hour show, once a week, talking about mother-related things, So each week, one week we would talk about mother and pregnancy. The second week was about child-related and parenting care. The third week was about Omani women entrepreneurs. And the fourth week was about charities, Omani charities. So it was very much focused on the community of Oman. And we did that show for about 2 years. And it was cool. I met some amazing people. I had local celebrities on it. I had royalty on it. I had just amazing people, And then, of course, my husband's job moved us to Abu Dhabi. And I was like, okay, well, that's the end of that career. Celebrity gone. And what I missed was those conversations. I was meeting so many people and
Sure.
finding so many stories.
That's my favorite thing about podcasts.
It's the most
It's the
fulfilling thing
stories.
about
Yeah,
it.
it's the
I love the stories,
Yeah.
And I felt like a bit of a desert, barren. I was like, I'm new to Abu Dhabi again, because I spent some time in Abu Dhabi as a kid. And then suddenly I didn't know how to reach out to people. So I thought, podcasts had started going into play. It was 2013. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to start a podcast. And I'm just going to find women entrepreneurs, because of all the podcasts that I did in Oman, it was the women entrepreneurs that I enjoyed the most. The discovery of them starting a business, managing home life, all of that, and having their own life and having time for themselves. So I focused on that, and it started January 2014, and the first episode was the lady who was my midwife when I had my daughter, because she had started her own business. Her business was about, she was helping you give birth and everything. So she came on, and then sequentially just started talking to all these women, and you probably experienced the same. Some of the sound quality was terrible. You look back on it and you go, oh my God, what did I ask that person?
You know the
How did-"
poppers?
Yeah,
So we
Yeah.
used to have guests and who'd come into the poppers. They talk like that
I
all the
know.
time. So yeah, we've had.
So listening back, I actually cringe when I listen back at my own episodes.
Well, you learn the hard way.
You learn
Yeah.
the hard, and it's exactly the same as you. I don't have a podcasting background. when I went on the radio, I really didn't have technology, and we weren't great friends. It was all done,
You just
and
show
you
up.
just had to show up and talk to the guests. So suddenly I had to learn all this technology and
Do it yourself.
do it myself. And I had my Blue Yeti, which is the microphone I use, Audacity, and my laptop. And people think you've got this huge setup like in
Right?
here, right? And I'm like,
But
no.
you actually don't need all this stuff.
No,
No.
you don't. It's
just-
very
yeah.
simple.
Yeah. It's just
So
that,
it just went from there, and it's been a hard slog. Like you, I try put out, like this week I didn't put out because my company's, I've got a lot of stuff going on and it's taken over, and it's just me that does the podcast.
Okay, yeah.
So I haven't put out one, but I know what you mean. And so I've done 114 episodes.
That's a
in
heck
the
of a
4
lot.
years.
That's a lot.
And what was the first one? When was the first one?
What was the first
When
one?
was the first one?
I think it was January 2014.
Oh, so about. Oh, actually,
Yeah.
you're the oldest
She was the
podcast.
oldest.
Yeah.
You're the
Yeah.
original then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So but it's been fun, and every one of the ladies I've met has had an amazing story, and I decided to focus on the women of the Middle East because there are some great stories of women entrepreneurs here, and the Western media and medias around the world, they make a bad reference sometimes to the way women are here, the way they're treated,
So
and
you wanna
and
enlighten
how
them a bit.
and it's just these women come on and they don't talk about I've got this problem, that problem, this problem. They're not talking about cultural problems. They're talking about business problems. The challenges that they face and how they're going to make this next dollar and the marketing issues they're having. And these are the problems. And these women these are feisty women, So it's about sort of changing that color.
Has it found its audience, do you think?
Yes, I have a massive audience in America.
Really?
Yeah, about 40% of my audience comes from
Oh, wow.
America. Yeah,
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
and then oddly enough, France and Slovakia are my other two top countries.
Wow.
That's cool.
That's interesting.
Can't understand that.
Curious people.
Curious, yeah. So I have listenership in Saudi. There's a podcast network in Saudi.
Mustadfair.
What's it called?
Mustadfair, right?
I think so.
MSTDFR.
Yeah, that's
Yo,
it.
yeah,
Yeah,
they're
they
really
run
cool
a bunch of different shows, and one of the ladies on there, she has a show, and I often communicate with her. So it's been an interesting journey. I've talked to people from Lebanon, to Algeria, to Oman, locally.
And do you usually look for them, or do they find
It's a bit
you,
of
or is
It's a bit of a mix. Like the lady I'm interviewing next week, she called me up and says, "Hey, I want to be on your show."
That's good.
And I went, "Okay, well, let's just see first."
I mean, yeah, it's the...
So, but yeah, no, most of them want to come on and talk about their story. They want to share it because they want more women to start doing the same.
Yeah.
That's what the essence of the show is, to tell women, if you have an idea, if you have a passion, don't just sit there and wonder and dream. Make it happen.
Yeah, we want to tell them that it's possible.
Absolutely.
For someone
If it doesn't happen, great. Then you move on and you find the next thing. But what if it does?
Yeah.
And what if you add to the economy? What if you create jobs? What if you start branching out globally? What if you start, making an impact in your own country, in many different forms? And that's what we're trying to say,
Yeah.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
So let's OT, I want to ask you about like the different guests you've had. What of the 64 episodes, which ones kind of jump out to you as special episodes? What are some of your favorite ones?
I think for me, the special ones or favorite ones are those that mark a special time for us in the sense that after that episode, it leaves us sitting back and thinking what we're doing, and it has us repositioning or redirecting our ship, and not just as a podcast, but as individuals. So if you break it out, the four of us, I mean, Reem runs a video production company that she started out of her apartment. Now it's a big office in Media City.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, she's an entrepreneur in her own
Yeah,
right, huh?
exactly.
Okay, what's the name of that company?
It's Collective BKP.
Right. Wow.
Right. I started in a radio background and I do advertising. For us and Jib, even though they're both musicians, for us actually does data analytics for IDC. Irshad used to work in shipping, and then he kind of left that and went back to Sri Lanka. But between the four of us, we just have that one person you meet or an episode you record, and you take so much from that. So for example, I think Odyssey was a personal favorite because he managed to say a lot that I didn't know how to articulate before. Another great episode was we brought Mayor 139. So that says alias. Carlos, he was one of the original 1970s and 1980s hip-hop taggers. They used to tag the trains.
Echo of history?
Yes.
Okay.
So now we've got somebody from the originals, you know.
Cool.
And now he's more into academia. So that entire conversation is this transformation that he has had from his artistic experiences to taking it to the mainstream, but also now getting involved in community building, doing trainings and classes and traveling the world, teaching. So I love it because he said a line in that episode that says, I have 2 passports. He's like, I have my American passport, but he's like, I also have the passport of hip hop that allowed him to kind of just go meet people, is like sit in the streets and have amazing conversations with them.
Is this his stuff?
That's the one.
Okay, cool.
Awesome. You
Yeah.
also had Seeds.
And
I
Seeds
think that
was
awesome.
Yeah.
I love his work.
And that's the thing, like they all inspire us in different ways. Like,
Yeah.
because I'm just trying to remember them off the top of my head. The beauty about El Seeds was
Oh, right, of course.
people
He
know
was
the
here at
reputation. He lives here now.
Oh, yeah, but
Yeah.
he spoke here, didn't he?
Oh,
Yeah,
on
he
your
came
show.
to
It's amazing.
AZ.
Yeah.
He's amazing.
Amazing.
And because he went to Egypt and I'm Egyptian and it totally hit
there you
me
go,
and
right?
I loved it.
So he talks about a wall he did on Australia, where this little girl came to him while he's tagging the wall, and he's like, "Oh, I want to talk to you." She takes him to the side, and she says, "When I grow up, I want to be just like you." And she writes her name on a piece of paper and like the date, and the date is all wrong. It wasn't actual date; it's just numbers on it. She's like 7, and she gave him the piece of paper, and that was like 5-6 years ago. Till this day, he keeps it in his wallet, which we took for the episode artwork. Like, we took a photo of that.
That's awesome.
But like that kind of stories you'd only get out in a podcast.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right? And that's the beauty of this platform. It just allowed us to talk to people and learn so much. Last week's episode was with Aham and Moflo, 2 brothers. One is a beat maker, the other is a singer. And just they have this tenacity and discipline in their work ethic and how they're pushing out music. Like, one of the biggest problems non-Arabic musicians worry about, they struggle with here, is there's no tour circuit. So where do you go as an artist to build a tour in the Middle East? And they're like, fine, we're going to start our own tour circuit. They're like, we're not going to wait for people to do it for us, you know? They don't get booked for concerts. They go rent out a space and they make their own event and they run their own concerts. So they just kind of went out their way to make it happen. And that didn't only help us, because I was like, okay, cool, then you don't have an excuse for not getting something done. The internet allows for a lot.
Sure.
And research you, figure out what you're doing, try to get you on the show, and let's just talk life. And usually, our format is, I think what was great with our format is that we actually sit on sofas, so we're just laid back, and we try to disarm the guest as much as possible, especially if they're famous, where they've done so many interviews before. And I tell them, like, this is not an interview, you're just hanging out with friends.
Okay, that's great.
That's exactly it. And that's when you really just get some really cool stuff
So
out
where's
of
your
them.
space? Where is this, where do you do your
So that's
interviews?
at Collective.
At Collective,
So they have
at
their
the,
sound studios where we get to,
I see.
it started out in the bedroom and then it upgraded to that. I think another great one was Tyrone, who's from Amsterdam. He started something called the Notorious IBE, which is it's like a breakdancing event, but also it became sort of a street culture festival, if you will.
Okay, I'm Googling
yeah.
Tyrone Vandermee.
There we go. And he said something in that episode where it was like, because of where we are now, it's our responsibility to educate the people in, the C-level managers or people up top, to educate them on what the youth is doing. So, and he said the best thing is like, that makes sure that you need to become cultural moguls, and you need to
Culture of moguls, I like that.
right?
Yeah.
And he said that, I'm like, what? And it's one of those episodes that I'd go back and listen to again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
Because like he had some great stuff to say about, just you're shaping that, and you got to be able to use he instilled the sense of responsibility of using your platform right in us, and that was also one of those key episodes.
You're right, that your platform becomes a space to share those messages, doesn't it? And that's powerful.
Yeah.
That's very powerful.
So how do you, just quickly follow up on that, you've got all these great personalities coming through. How do you typically book your guests? How do you find them? What's your process for also deciding, because you do one every single week, so how do you choose, the actual process internally?
So the process is between us is, let's say I decided to drop a name, so I drop yours, like, okay, we want to get you on the show. First question, they're going to ask me, what's the angle? I'm like, no angle, this is what he does, that's it. So you just need to do something really cool that people want to talk about.
Yeah.
So at some point I actually wanted to bring the GM at Leo Burnett, or for example, the president here at AUD.
Oh yeah,
These are
Lance,
two names that are legendary in the advertising industry in the Middle East. Everybody knows them,
Okay,
right?
good.
Dr. Lance DeMasi, you ask about his BBDO years before AUD and that transition. You're going to get wealth that you would never find from anybody else. So that's
he always has something amazing to say.
right.
He's
Yeah,
great to
and
talk
Marina Ayad, who's director of Art Dubai, we had her on this podcast, and
She was his student,
she
yeah.
was his student, and she was saying it was
We all
awesome.
passed through
He
him.
was
We
awesome.
like our final. We all have
You have
something
to, and
close
that's the
with
beauty.
them.
So then that's someone who's interesting enough. And so usually that's it. We just find someone we're really interested in talking to
Yeah.
and want to know a lot more about them, and we just bring them on the show.
So it starts with the person then.
It's
Not
always
with
the person.
Yeah.
Okay.
In some cases, rare cases where I got hit up, so Irshad's dad fell very ill, which is why he kind of left everything and moved back to Sri Lanka. At the time, an old childhood friend of mine from Sharjah gave me a call, like, I'd like to come on the show.
Okay.
I was like, why do you want to come on the show? So his dad passed away, and he wanted to talk about that story. He's like, I'm ready to talk about it because it's going to help Irshad, it's going to help for us. It's going to help people who are going through this problem
Yeah.
with family. I was like, that's amazing. And we spoke about it. He struggled to articulate himself a lot of the times, but you hear the emotions in his voice and that experience and kind of how that empowered him, and how his relationship with his father improved the last 2 years before he passed away. So you get really beautiful stories out of people.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. So do you ever have like a time where you guys just decide to talk about stuff yourself without having a special guest or something?
Yeah, that's usually our backup plan when we realize
Yeah,
we
I
don't have
can
episodes coming out.
That's right.
Yeah.
Something is just,
Yes, we panic, and usually it's after a very busy time. So Dubai Links recap
Yeah.
was just Reem and I. We didn't have a guest there.
Yeah,
Step,
heard that.
no, we had somebody for Step. I think we did a recap of our weekend where we went to this event, I think by Vans, and it was like a few things that occurred. So like we kind of recapped that together.
So you were at Step.
Yeah, so
Okay,
we
I
were
was there too. Yeah.
So we're community partners for
Yeah.
Step, which was awesome.
Oh, that's
I
fantastic.
was really excited. I went to
Oh,
like,
community part. That's great.
I saw the wall and our logo was there. I was like, ah.
That's very cool. Well, congrats on that.
awesome.
I thought Step was great. We
Saw it
had
on your Instagram.
we had Ray Dargam on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who told me? Yeah, you guys had Ray here.
Yeah.
You told me, right? You had
I
Ray here,
think
I think.
so.
Yeah.
And we had, what's his name? The other guy.
co-founder.
The co-founder.
You had his co-founder.
Yeah, so it's
okay,
like
cool.
we both
so
did
we each
Step
did.
stories.
We each interviewed
That's
the
awesome.
founders. Great.
I felt bad for forgetting his name. Baha Musalli, yeah, that was the other guy.
Yeah, yeah. And so Nicholla, maybe I'll throw the same question at you. Like, how do you, what are some of your favorite guests you've had? People that have inspired you, or another.
I had a guest just recently. she runs. Her name's Miriam. She runs a company here called Pomegranate Institute. It's a language institute, and she actually comes from a humanitarian background. And she's one of these people that I think should speak.
Mm.
She's just got that sound. That gentleman you were talking about. You're just completely taken in by the
Yes.
story. And
What was her name again?
Miriam Shabib.
Okay.
And she was a great talker. I loved listening to her journey of how she went, the story of the pomegranate seed to how she created the institute.
Sorry.
It's beautiful. There are many ladies I've spoken to. I don't have anybody in particular because they've all added something to the show.
Right.
But yeah.
And so the theme you're generally after is about women entrepreneurs in
The Middle East.
the Middle East,
Yeah.
and trying to basically get a stronger understanding of
Yeah.
what
You
they're
know, how
thinking
they're
about.
running their businesses,
Right.
what's important to them, what are the challenges they face, what inspires them.
So what are some of the themes that have emerged for you? I mean, perhaps that people would not expect, because you were mentioning earlier that there is a preconception, and then there's the reality, and then so what? Any interesting themes emerged through the conversations?
No, the themes are these women are just driven.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they all have a mission. They all have an idea, and they've all wanted to make something of it. It's not a unusual theme.
Yeah.
It's just how they've got there. And some people have got there because they were in a career, they didn't like it.
Mm-hmm.
They said, right, I'm done with that. I'm sick to death of working for someone else. I want to do something.
Isn't
for
that
my
how
own.
more or less all entrepreneurs at some point snap and say,
Yeah.
I can't work
Yeah,
for somebody else
I'm
anymore?
the same. You know, I have my own company now.
Yeah.
And I, you know, you have to have a boss, which is part of life. You know, you have your mom and dad, they're your boss when you're a kid. But I didn't want to do that anymore, and I wanted to put my own vision on the table, the same as these women. They had their own ideas, their own logic, and they wanted to go by that passion, you know. There's another woman that I recorded last year, Dina. She's in Egypt, and she as well, she's about social entrepreneurship, you know, and looking at ways of how the big issues of the world can be fixed, you know, through community, through businesses, you know, and just stuff like that, coming to the table with ideas like that. Like, I don't think about the big issues, how to solve them. She does.
Do you, because you went to Egypt for this interview, or
No,
she
no,
was
we
here?
did it
Skype?
Oh, I see.
We
You're
did
brave.
Yeah, actually, some of them have been okay, some of them have been really bad. But that particular interview was okay, you know. Technology is, it either loves you or hates you that day.
Yeah.
You
Right.
got to go with the flow,
Exactly.
you know.
Let me ask you about the podcast community group that you have. So how is that going? Are you trying
It's
to?
fine.
Yeah.
You know, I started it a few months ago. I'm kind of treating it a bit like a book club.
Okay, I'm
When
a member.
I'm-
I'm a member.
Cool. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get people to, when they listen to a podcast, share it. You know,
I see.
and
cool.
That's
see-
what that's about.
and
I need to invite you guys to another one.
And
the
just-
Slack group.
the who?
Okay.
On Slack, I don't know if you ever
I don't
use
know
Slack.
Slack.
It's an app.
Oh, it's not on Facebook. Oh, okay.
No.
Yeah.
It's on Slack because then we
Okay.
share documents, we share studies, we share
Oh,
researches
okay.
that have been done.
Cool.
And it's a group of just Middle Eastern-based podcasters, including people
Oh,
from like
cool.
Jordan, from Beirut, from Saudi, like the.
Yeah.
Oh,
These
that's
different
cool.
guys,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'd like to be a part of that.
Yeah, I'd
Yeah.
like to be a
Yeah.
part of that.
So after this, I should take your
Please.
emails.
Okay, great,
and invite
great.
you guys to it.
So, what was the question? I forgot.
Just about the podcast community.
Yeah, no, it's just a space to talk, talking, treating it a
Yeah.
bit like a book club. I listen, like when I exercise in the morning, I like to listen to,
Right.
and there's so much good material out there. So, it's like reading a book. So this is the episode I shared today. I thought this was funny. I thought this was, you know, with the Trump stuff recently. Have a listen to this. Tell me what you think. You know. So that's what I'm trying to do with that.
So let's talk about that more generally. What do you guys think about the status of podcasts in Dubai? Do people listen to them as much as you'd like? Is there enough
No,
awareness?
For
or-
me, there's not enough awareness.
No.
I don't know. It's still very pioneering. We're still early
pioneer-
adopters.
We're
Yeah,
the
we are.
pioneers right here.
Yeah, we are fairly early
You know, there's
adopters.
still, I don't know about you, but I still get people that say to me, I don't know what a podcast is.
Yeah, that's always.
And
That's
I think it's the word podcast.
I grab what I do is I grab their
personally, I don't
phone.
like it.
I grab their phone.
when it's
I
an
show
Apple
them-
phone.
that-
I subscribe
I
for
say,
them.
here you go. Let me just do this for you.
I do that as well. Yeah, I'm like, oh, let me show you. So here it is. Oh, I'll subscribe for you. Don't
Yeah,
worry.
don't worry,
I'm like,
just hit
so
that
this is
button.
where you can check it out now.
Exactly.
You know.
Some people think that podcast is like an old thing.
But
I
it
guess.
is
Well,
technically.
it is old.
It is
Yeah.
quite old, yeah.
It's very
It
old.
was brought to life about 2013.
But
But
it's become
cereal.
more popular though because like I know YouTubers now that do podcasts. I didn't know
Yeah.
about podcasts until the YouTubers I followed started doing podcasts. You know.
I mean, the
So-
main thing is it's basically just pre-recorded radio
Exactly.
that you
That's
just
what I
pull
tell
down on
people.
your phone. But it's amazingly convenient because it's very
very
constantly
mobile.
updated. What's
Yeah.
that?
It's very mobile.
It's very
It's
mobile.
And
very
it's one of the
mobile.
only one of the only mediums you can use and to be doing something else.
Right.
Exactly.
You can't
That's usually
be-
my always my pitch when I'm
Okay.
talking
Yeah.
about. Yeah.
So we
You
all
can't-
agree on that one.
You
yeah.
can't. You can drive a car. You can
Yeah.
go to the gym. You
Yeah.
can cook. You can. There's so many things you can be doing and listening to a podcast.
So you're
You can't
multitasking.
you can't do that with video.
Right.
It's a one activity
That's right,
thing.
yeah.
You can't do that with a book. You can't do that with a document. It's a one.
Exactly. It
exactly
allows
right.
for multiple activities around it. I think one of the coolest things I usually hear from people is when they feel the need to respond and they want to throw in their opinion mid-episode, but they're like, oh wait, no, I'm not talking to people.
No, that's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're having,
It's like-
you're listening. You're like
Yeah.
spying in on a conversation.
Exactly.
And then you're like, oh, that's a good point.
Yeah.
You're like, oh
Yeah,
wait,
yeah,
they
yeah.
can't. hear
Exactly. So like my brother's like that. So what he'll do is if he's driving back from work
Yeah.
and he's listening to it, he'd end up sending me voice notes with his opinion as he's listening to the
Okay,
episode.
yeah, that's
because like he feels the need that I should hear it.
Maybe that's the next generation of podcasts is to somehow build in some interactivity.
So we're trying to do that as well. So we experimented with it at Soul DXB. So for us, we say Soul DXB was the mark where we started because when I met the guys, their performance was the opening gig for pre-Soul. And then a year later, we're at Soul. They actually built a radio booth that was used by us, Stretch and Bobito, which were like one of the first hip-hop radio shows out in New York, and Kish Cash and Dan Greenpeace. So they're out of the UK. So we're like the only local show, so it's really exciting. And it's a live session. So what we did was we had it Facebook Live, and we had let people to throw in questions, get involved in the conversation, and we're experimenting because thing is, a lot of the episode is created in post-edit.
Yeah.
You just talk, you record, and then see how you want to build that story later. So,
That's cool.
So then we just involve them on Facebook because I cannot throw out a video of the episode because it's going to be very different from what the podcast actually sounds like. So we experimented with Facebook Live at the time, and it's like, I think that's how we're trying to educate and involve people.
The medium can be used in many different ways. You know, it can be used in a corporate environment. It can be an internal radio, a podcast. You know, you could do conversations with different team groups, bosses, what's going on in the company. There's so many different ways. It can be used in this setting, you know. It could be the way you do it, the way I do it. There's many different ways of doing it.
And it's, I think at its core, it's really about education in some way. You know, because I listen to podcasts so I stay up to date on things. So I listen to technology podcasts, and then I know what's going on in the current trends in technology. I listen to news and politics, basketball,
But there's
whatever,
lots that
Dubai-related things.
But there's still barriers here. There's still the barriers of, like we were saying earlier, how do you make money from it?
Yeah.
You know, how do you get your listenership? Where is your listenership? How many people are listening to podcasts? These are all the barriers, and unfortunately, we don't have all of those answers because we're still at the beginning of this journey.
Right, so the listenership
So you
is
really
not,
have to get someone that loves podcasts.
Here's the thing, the
And it's
potential
experimentation.
listenership,
You experiment with it.
the potential listenership is huge.
Yeah,
The problem
absolutely.
is that not enough folks know about it.
Exactly.
Or even try to know about it.
Yeah, and
Well, they
this
don't
is
know
why
where to discover it.
you try to
Because
educate.
they go onto iTunes and they download their music. They forget that they can go and
They
look
can
at
go-
podcasts.
Yeah,
That is
that's right
They
there,
don't,
too.
they don't usually think about it. Like I've had iTunes and I download my music, and then there's that podcast icon on the side, and I usually never even pay attention to that icon. You
So
know?
education is always the barrier, and the thing is, it's trial and error because nobody's done it before you. You just try to experiment and see what works and what doesn't. So for us, social media is very big for us. That's our main play.
Yeah.
We used to dedicate our evenings and weekends to the podcast. So you wouldn't really go out much, and you just focus on, okay, how do we improve? If we're not recording, we're building stuff on the back end and trying to learn and retrofit. So just as part of that, we had, part of our mandate, we have to be at events. We have to be out there, we got to go see people, we got to talk to, if I'm talking culture and community, the least I could do is actually be involved.
I like that. Yeah, I noticed looking at your episode list, a number of them are covering events, right?
Yeah.
So what's your process? You go to the event and you're just like doing.
We just go hang out. We actually go to have a good time and see what's going on and
talk
do
about
that
what
and
you
just
did.
and network. We talk to people.
Yeah, staying connected basically.
Yeah, and I think some of the most interesting comments I get is like people would come to you like, "Yo, I love what you guys are doing. Dukkan is awesome." I was like,
great.
"Oh, thanks." I was like, "Which episode did you like?" He's like, "No, but so what exactly is it?" I'm like, "Really? Like, you had this
You like us,
entire
but you don't know
time,
us."
but had no clue what it is that we do." And
That's
I think,
pretty funny.
and that's I think the power branding. Like, get a few T-shirts done with the logo on them. Go to events in those T-shirts only.
See what happens.
You know, and just get that conversation going.
That'll get people interested.
Exactly. At least I usually hope you're curious enough to go see what it is, but I end up with these kind of comments like, "Yo, I like what you're doing, man." And it actually happened when I was here.
Oh.
as soon as I walked into AUD, I saw someone walking out. It was like used to be with us back in the day, and like, hey man, congratulations, yo, Mr. Dukkan, and it's kind of get all excited. I was like, oh, thanks. I was like, and like I stood with him for a couple of minutes, and he's like, so like how does it work exactly? Like where is it YouTube? I'm like, no.
No,
I was like, you know what, I'm a little late, but let's have this conversation later. It's like,
I need this conversation.
Yeah.
This conversation.
And the crazy thing is that everybody has a phone. I mean, like, people are on their phones like, all day long. My students, my God, they're like glued to the phone. And so it shouldn't be that difficult to get this over this threshold to say, look.
Well, you can download the episodes somewhere else through
Yeah.
your Wi-Fi and then
Yeah.
listen to them when you don't have Wi-Fi.
Exactly. And the thing is, you can put the episode anywhere.
Yeah.
SoundCloud, YouTube, iTunes, everywhere. So you can find it everywhere.
Yeah.
Anyone can.
But only
download
if
it.
you
They just
listen
need
up
to
there.
know that it's there.
Yeah.
We need to do a campaign about just generally educating people
But
about
talking
podcasts.
about that, Facebook at the moment are experimenting with just doing audio.
just doing audio. Yeah.
Because Facebook and lives and videos, they're just taking up so much RAM space. I think it's the right term.
Yeah,
Um,
bandwidth.
And they're just looking at testing, just doing audio.
That's
so that's
interesting.
massively.
So that should work for
us, that's going to be huge.
All right, that'd be cool.
We're just waiting for it.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
Like, come on, hurry up.
That's
you know?
exactly it. I think a lot of it is like sessions like this. So for me, I always try to bring in other podcasters or anybody who's doing something cool. Okay, you should come on the show and let's talk
Yeah.
about it. Because then it's the formula that helped YouTube grow. So what I tell a lot of people that podcasts in the Middle East today is YouTube 2010,
Yeah.
right? Where it was struggle. You knew of certain famous people, but dominantly out of the U.S. And it was the beginning of vlogging, and nobody really knew what's going on. And then Saudi kickstarted with like Tilfaz and U-Turn, which are the two largest production houses out of Saudi Arabia. But even then, they struggled to gain followers. So that's where we
That's
are.
a good way to look at it.
And
Very good.
it's on this
Yeah.
trajectory where it
Yeah.
is going to grow because there
We're
is
at what they call the knee of the curve.
exactly
Yeah.
because their supply is there
Yeah.
now
Yeah.
and it's rising, and then there's the demand as well, and the exposure. So I like Kerning Cultures. I don't know if you've
Yeah.
checked these girls out, Hiba and Razan. So they're on an American audio format of podcasting. So they're trying to tell Middle Eastern socio-political story to some degree, but
okay.
they're targeting strictly American market out of the
Okay.
Middle East. So they're telling Middle Eastern stories. Like they had an episode, for example, like Arabs for Trump. So they're talking about Arab Americans who decided to vote for Trump.
Interesting.
And very interesting content. But then their target is very different. So we bring them on and like, okay, so what do you guys are doing?
So you had them on?
Yeah,
Do
we
you know
did.
how many countries you go across?
Yeah, I'm a numbers guy. I love to know what's going on.
And what tool
numbers
do
tell
you
the
use
story.
to
I use Libsyn.
it's like-
yeah.
Okay, we use Podbean.
Okay.
Yes, I heard about that.
Yeah. But Libsyn was one of the short lists. We looked at a bunch of options, but we popped.
Libsyn just made my life a lot
Libsyn is
easier.
looking a bit old though, isn't it?
It
does
is.
a good job, but it's feeling a bit structurally old.
Yeah. It's like Reddit. You
Yeah.
know, like Reddit
Yeah.
is a great
It's amazing, but
social
then
media
you
platform,
look
but
at
it
it
just
and you're
looks
like,
old.
what?
Yeah.
What is
So
this?
what I do is I take the numbers and I redesign the layout. So we have a press kit that we usually share, especially if
that's
I'm
cool.
trying to get a known celebrity status
Oh, could you
guest.
share?
Yeah, I'll share with you guys our press kit. So I
That's
usually
cool.
repackage
So then that
and
helps
redesign
you
that.
to get the agent or whatever to say, yeah, we'll go.
Exactly,
on. Yeah.
because usually they'd want to know.
Yeah, they want to know whether
They
that's
want to know
wasting
your
their
numbers,
time.
what
Yeah.
you're downloading.
Yeah.
The other problem we have
It says downloads.
is it says downloads, it doesn't say listenership.
Yeah.
So when you go on your Google Analytics, you get a
Yeah.
bounce rate.
Right,
Yeah.
right, of course.
You
Right.
want something like that for your listenership, so
Yeah.
you know how far into the episode did they listen
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
That's the one
before
thing we
they
don't
bounce
have.
off.
Yeah.
We don't have that. iTunes won't provide that.
Because sometimes
Right.
it'll just give you a number if they went on but didn't really listen or
Yeah.
start listening.
Yeah, and you get the people that will listen for like 2 minutes and go, "Oh, it was great,"
Yeah.
and that gets
And the
added to your
biased ones, yeah.
and you're like, "Well, did you
Thanks.
listen to the whole thing,
Yeah,
or are you
right.
just being nice?" And
Yeah.
that's frustrating. So
Mhm.
somebody, I'm not going to do it, but I want
Somebody's gotta do
somebody
that.
to create that
Yeah,
bounce rate for.
Yeah, you
Your
just want
download.
detailed.
because
That would be
iTunes
massive.
does downloads,
Yeah.
SoundCloud does plays. So
Yeah.
so with Libsyn, I don't rely on their SoundCloud numbers.
No, I
find my
don't.
own SoundCloud
Yeah,
numbers.
yeah.
And I realized by people's comments, SoundCloud, you see where people are talking and
Yes.
commenting on your episode.
Yeah.
most of the comments come in music, which I expected. Like obviously people would rather listen to music.
Yeah.
But then when the comments come in the episode is where, okay, like what was it that you found interesting that you're talking about? Another format is people actually message us or they write to us or we bump into them in person and they say something out of the episode and my first reaction is I'm just usually incredibly impressed. I'm like, you know what? You've sat through an hour and a half. So you know what? I like you.
Yeah. I'm the same actually.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you
You know,
for taking the
that's
time.
Yeah.
They say something meaningful. I mean,
Yes.
I got
It's
you.
awesome when people say to you, I love my, I had a lady yesterday on Twitter saying, I really loved your episode last week, thank you. And it just makes you think, that 6 hours I spent putting from recording to editing to putting up was
Right?
worth it.
Yeah. I think some of the best comments like I'd get was, actually I had a colleague who told me that because she lived in her family lives in Sharjah and she drove to Media City every day. So she actually said she's like it helped me forget that I was stuck in traffic.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the coolest comments I got.
Oh yeah, that's good. That's
And then I never realized the reach we had on because you see the numbers. It's different when it's people talking versus you see. It's like we're like 45% UAE, 20% Saudi, and it kind of breaks into other stuff. But then I get a message from someone in Arizona, and like he took the time to write a letter on Facebook that he sent to me about how we changed his perspective of the youth in the Middle East, and he had no idea what that was like.
I love that.
That's fantastic.
I love that. You see, that's the power.
amazing.
That's
Yeah.
the power we can.
It
Because
does.
you've affected that person and his outlook for the rest of his life. You've affected his kids,
It's insane.
his ongoing whoever because if anybody sits there and says, "Hey, things are not good in the Middle East. Let's not go there."
Yeah.
They're like, "No, no, no, no. You gotta listen to this guy first." You
No,
know?
I really think that is
And
fantastic.
I think that was one of those I was like, you know what, I need to print and frame that letter
Yeah.
because this is just amazing.